Over the last 6 or 7 years, we've seen an average of about $300 billion a year going into clean energy technologies. And just real quick, the definition that we're using here for clean energy is renewables, which is really wind and solar, geothermal, and small hydro projects. It is what we call energy smart technologies. It's biofuels, but what it's not is natural gas. I'm not counting nuclear here. It's a pretty narrow definition overall. So even with that narrow definition, you see about $1/3 of $1 trillion going in every year into the clean energy sector. If you look at about the 100 gigawatts of solar that was built around the world last year, about half of that was in China, 50,000 megawatts. It's just an unbelievable number. To put that in context, that's about 4 times as much as the US has ever built in 1 year before. And China's grid, it represents something like, I don't know, 4% of the total build that was added, 4% of the total grid in China. So China is very rapidly adding clean capacity. There's a lot more optionality out there for consumers these days. So that's really a great thing, ultimately. More empowered consumers will demand lower cost and demand further innovation. Batteries are critically important to the continuing kind of evolution or revolution around clean energy technologies. That is absolutely critical if we're going to see more change going forward. A EV is actually a fundamentally superior product to an internal combustion engine car. And if you haven't driven one, you should, because you'll find out that that is generally true. They drive better, they drive quieter, the acceleration is better, and they require less servicing. And frankly, they're more convenient to actually fill up the tank as long as you have a home where you can plug it in relatively easily. I think what's striking is how in the last 18 months, the sort of conventional wisdom around transportation has been rapidly shifting. And it's very exciting to me, I'd say. So the first sort of example I would give was this Economist cover from last summer, where they portray the internal combustion engine as roadkill. Change in the energy sector, in my view, is now really where we're at and we will continue to be. I mean, 10 years ago, I think people would say that the power sector in particular wasn't a particularly exciting place. Things moved slowly over decades. But when you look at a picture like what we've seen in the United States in the last 10 years, it is astounding. But if you think about what we would call the gap between what we see is going to be invested and what we think is needed, it's about a $5 trillion gap over the next 22 years or so. That sounds like an enormous amount of money, and it's not a small amount, but if you amortize that over that period of time, it seems like it's entirely doable.